Welcome. You're listening to the GrowOrtho podcast, presented by HIP. This podcast is dedicated to orthodontists who want to stand strong in their market and be leaders in their community. Now, on to today's show. So, Michael, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. Looking forward to having you on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being on and being part of the party here.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those listening or watching who may not know you, just take a moment, introduce yourself, give us your background, maybe even hobbies and what it is that you do.
Oh, it's a dangerous question when you throw the hobbies part in, but no, my humble beginning started in banking, but today I'm a practice consultant, just getting right into it. Been in the industry for probably about 15 years, which is fairly young. I'm not one of those old crusty consultants that's been around for 50 years. And so, and that's really kind of the philosophy or vision of our company is, we try to have new age consulting, bring that to the party. The millennials, zennials, tend to be our clients, but not everybody. We're a full service consulting firm, meaning we help doctors get into ownership. We do a lot of pre-ownership consulting, so starting up and buyer representation. And then we also have probably the other half of our clients is helping them grow and expand into new worlds, I suppose, just trying to get them to the next level of their business.
Yeah.
So that's what we are today. I think we have about 4 consultants now, and we all kind of have our hand in on helping our clients.
Yeah, and with next level consultants, I mean, is each consultant within the business specialized, or how's that work with each person and each consultant?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question because all of us have had different consulting backgrounds before we joined or started this company and came together. We pride ourselves on staying kind of in our lane as consultants. And what I mean by that is, when I was out there doing consulting by myself, I kind of stayed in the banking lane because I'm an ex-banker and heavy financial marketing background. And so I kind of stayed in that strategy, financials, just business coach, definitely leadership. But then I realized I couldn't talk to the hygienists or the clinical team very well. I never lived their world. So Paula, my partner, Paula Quinn, she's a hygienist, owns her own practice in Phoenix, Arizona. She's been in dentistry for 30 plus years. She everything operational and clinical is her game. And so anytime one of those questions come up, I might have the answer, but I like to defer to the expert. So Paula's the other coach, and then Stefani is our billing queen. She's our front office guru. And so we quickly found out, Paula and I, is like, oh gosh, like don't ask us those insurance claims questions. We never lived that world. And so even in all the 30 years that Paula had been in that game, she always got those questions. It was like, oh gosh, I got to call somebody after this, right? So we pulled in Stefani, and so Stefani's really that coach. And so yeah, to answer your question, we all kind of stay in our lane, and I think that's what makes us a little bit different is the fact that if there's a problem, we can solve it, I guess. I think that's a good hip-hop song. It's a good one. So yeah, that's our motto.
Yeah, leveraging strengths versus being somewhat generalist. I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. What are some specific ways you guys help dental practices with leadership and culture?
Yeah, the funny thing is with all that practical knowledge that I just kind of threw at you there with all of Paula's years and all of my experience as a banker and strategist and Stefani, like we can get very granular in fixing a problem, right? Like if there's a broken system, we can jump in and fix that problem. But the thing about that is consultants can give you lots of different answers and solutions. The problem is having the team adopt that solution and running with it and actually creating change. So to me, leadership is a huge piece to every consulting firm's toolbox, and I think it starts with communication, Luke. I think great leaders need to always be improving their communication with their team. Culture-wise, to add on top of that, we're big fans of leading with transparency and not holding back on too much with your team. I always say that the analogy is like my daughter when she first started soccer, right? And everybody can imagine this, right? You start coaching and the little ones are running around and they're just clustering around the ball, and it's just pure chaos, right? It's like a ping pong ball in between all the kids. But that was before they got incorporated, or they were told that there was a goal to all this. It's not just to kick the ball around or to stay in these four lines. It's to actually score a goal. And so the minute you told those kids, okay, blue team, your job is to get the ball into that goal, it changed the entire game completely, right? And so I always say that to my clients is if you're not leading with some kind of vision and you're not leading with transparency, how in the hell is your team going to help you get into the goal? And I think that's the baseline, right, is leadership and culture and communication and how you deliver that, how you talk about the challenges of what didn't happen and how you talk about the wins that did happen, celebrating and talking and discussing and trying to always improve. So I think those are the baselines, Luke. That's a tough question because it's so loaded, but I think the big concept here is transparency and great communication.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of that, we see this all the time is getting buy-in from the team. Orthodontist or dentist will go buy something new. We could even say, signing up with HIP for marketing, and the team isn't bought in. And so, there's things that the team needs to do, obviously, and they don't really know why. They just know, well, this is just one extra thing, and we've been through this before. You've bought things or brought people in, maybe consultants in, and they're in and out, and they obviously want all this change to happen. But one thing we started doing is presenting to teams after the doctor signs up with us, for instance, and that whole talk with the team is geared towards them, what we're going to do to save them time, how we're going to make their lives easier, because we realize when we do that and get that buy-in, then things really happen. They adopt the process, and I think that's with anything. And you probably see that all the time going in practices. Teams can be, oh, here we go again, another consultant.
Hard eye roll. Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I'm sure that you guys have a process for that of communicating it well and letting them know, hey, we want you guys to be more successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I could piggyback on that, Luke, I think it's the key to it is having the team. I mean, you're going to introduce a concept or whatever, but it would be great to have the team come up with a solution and leading them to that versus just telling. And I think that's the big buzzword in consulting is coach versus consultant. And I think we all can be coaches and consultants, you as a marketing firm, us as practice consultants. But like consulting in theory is telling you what to do, and coaching is kind of coaching you to that best place. And we've always found that if the team can be a part of that solution somehow, that's always going to be adopted a little bit easier. But yeah, the hard eye rolls are tough, and the consulting's challenging. And even in your world, if everybody, the owner wants that change, but if they're not willing to lead that change, it doesn't happen. And everybody blames the consultant, but you just didn't listen to them. You paid them all this money, and you didn't even take their advice. So it's a challenge for sure. Yeah.
There's this saying, ideas are easy, but execution, I guess, is everything. You can come up with all the ideas, but typically you need less ideas and just more execution.
100%.
So
100%. Yeah.
I saw something on your website, and it is kind of interesting and stuck with me. It says, you're not a typical consultant. And I was just kind of curious, from your standpoint and opinion, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it already. I think a lot of consultants come from a specific background, and then that's what they're strong at, right? Like there's so many consultants out there that maybe came from the chair as a hygienist. And that's where they're going to be really heavy in their consulting is hygiene. And so I don't want to reiterate what we just talked about, but essentially you really need to understand where your consultant's background was in, because that's where they're going to be the most qualified and heavy in their approach and in what's important to their in their program. They're going to definitely be able to cover a little bit of financials and maybe a little bit of marketing strategy and a little bit of whatever leadership. But you have to really understand where they come from, right? If Tony Robbins was your coach, he's not going to know anything about hygiene, but he might make you a great leader. And if that's the kind of training you want, perfect. Tony's a perfect, coach for you. But if you're looking to boost your hygiene, you might be looking for that hygienist, background. So what makes us unique is the fact that we try to have somebody in every one of those departments that has that background, so that if I can't really coach somebody in a specific area, that we can bring in a specialist in that department. So I think that's what makes us unique. Definitely some others that are similar in that way. And so yeah, that's my big push, I suppose, is understanding every department of the practice and having someone spearhead that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with your banking background, I see that you've been a part of a lot of startups. I think I saw on your website 300 startups. So talk about that. Specifically, how have you helped with those practices?
Yeah, so startups and acquisitions are a huge piece of our game. We actually have our own podcast that you guys should definitely check out. Maybe we can add it to the show notes, but specifically about startups and acquisitions and the process of both of those start to finish. And that's what that program's all about. But yeah, I think over 500 that I've helped in my career get into ownership, whether startup or acquisition. Both of them are very unique in their own ways. Of course, startup, there's tons of advantages there where it's your team, your location, fresh marketing ideas, great lease. The banking structure is really awesome. They can graduate payments, just kind of give you the right launch pad, so to speak. You could screw up a lot more in a startup, meaning you could implement something, it could be terrible, and you could quickly cut it. It's not going to be devastating to your business. You don't have to be the fastest producer or the greatest salesperson because you're not trying to maintain what a seller has already done. And that's a perfect kind of transition to acquisition. Acquisition is also great, but also challenging. Acquisition, you got tons of cash flow coming in already. Usually, if you're buying a practice, if it doesn't have a lot of cash flow, you might consider doing startup, not buying a crappy practice. But an acquisition, it's for the most part plug and play. Systems are in place. No systems are ever really like 100%, of course. So you might have to tweak some things here and there. But for the most part, it's plug and play. And your biggest concern and challenge there is maintaining that production and keeping up with status quo. Because the minute you start like not doing production-wise what the seller is, you're slowly dying. So it's a little bit more pressure to keep things rolling the way they're already rolling and hopefully growing it, of course. But yeah, cash flow is the big king there. So different things, and we help clients do both, navigate both.
Yeah, with startups, one of the things I've seen, and we actually have started speaking at residency programs just to kind of educate more on the business side. But one of the things I see with someone who comes in, does a startup, blows it out of the water, and somebody who struggles is, for instance, I can think of somebody right now that we've worked with, and they're somewhat struggling, and they built out the best practice you would see, beautiful practice, all the technology, amazing 3D X-ray machines and big screens on the wall. And then they said, well, I've got $10,000 to market this thing.
I know exactly where you're heading with this.
Yes. It's interesting, but that's part of my mission is to really educate people on why that's not a good idea. And, going into it, you can have the best anything if you don't know how to get that to people, specifically for this practices, people in your local area. Create awareness, create saturation, kind of have omnipresence in your local market. It's going to be a tough road.
100%. I love that you're saying this, because the truth of the matter is, you're right. You could walk into just the best practice, beautiful location, all of those advantages that I just said, but if you don't have any money to market and get patients in the door, you've got nothing. And it's interesting because today's day and age, time stamping this in mid 2022, construction's out of control. Inflation is kind of getting crazy, obviously, and everything is going up. And we just came off of COVID, and remember all those ships that were parked in the water and we couldn't get anything delivered, and just crazy times right now. And so construction is crazy. Labor is really expensive. And so just in general, these projects are costing a lot of money. And so the big challenge is, of course, is the startup has to figure out how to build this office, and obviously not go crazy on the technology and all of that stuff, but to have an appropriate marketing budget. And that is the key. The other challenge is the banks. I mean, I'm an ex-banker. I'll call them out right now. Banks need to figure out how to lend more working capital and marketing dollars, and hell, even consulting dollars. They can easily give money to the equipment reps and to the construction, and that's because it's a hard asset, right? And they can collateralize that, so it's a very selfish situation there. But what really makes a startup go crazy is setting up solid systems, great communication, hence the consulting, a lot of marketing dollars to get people in the door, and then, of course, working capital to pay the bills for a few months while we're trying to break even. So working capital is key, is absolutely key.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the other things that potentially startups should just be aware of and maybe look out for?
Yeah, I mean, my big things are location, undercapitalization, which we just discussed, and probably not going too big right out of the gate. So back to location. So those are my three things. So back to location. Obviously, you need great visibility. It'd be nice to have visibility. Now, I know a lot of your audience is ortho, so ortho's been interesting. It used to be less retail, and you didn't have to be on First and Main. But now today, ortho's very much a quote-unquote retail game where people understand that ortho, that's an orthodontist. That's where I go. I don't need my GP to refer me in there. So the ortho game's totally different. And pedos, we talked about that, Luke, with pedos, same thing. I think people are starting to become way more educated about GP versus pedo versus ortho. Endo, perio, oral surgeon, a little bit different, but definitely pedo, ortho, and GP. You could be right on First and Main. Now, what happens is your rent's going to go up, of course, because that's high exposure. But so visibility helps. Demographics, of course. There's got to be a need. Don't go in the most competitive markets in the world. I mean, if you do, you better have you better be Mr. or Mrs. Personality. You better be amazing with clients, patients, because otherwise you're going to struggle. And I've seen that. I've seen someone like, wow, you've got the personality. Just go right in the heart of all that, and you're going to crush, right? And then there's all those clients who are like, you're pretty reserved. Let's find a spot that's in dire need for you, And I think you got to be real with yourself about who you are there. So we already talked about undercapitalization. Get enough money, because if you don't, don't be afraid of the loan, because I know loans are very scary, no doubt. But you should be really scared if you didn't take enough for a startup. And we already talked about that, so I'll just leave that one go. And then just in general, don't go too big. There's a lot of noise out there with podcasts and the DSO rave right now. And, bigger, better, and all that. And the truth is the bigger you go, the more money your construction is, the more money your rent's going to be. There's just a lot of pressure to do that $2 million practice to justify those expenses. What's wrong with doing $1.5 million and 4 or 5 ops? There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to make a ton of money, but doing $1.5 million in a complex that's 3,000 square feet and you got all these employees to pay. I mean, that life work balance is really going right out the window. So it's all about vision. I don't want to make anybody's vision up for them, but these are the things that I would really want to deep dive into.
Yeah, and with vision, sometimes you have to be realistic and you can't go 0 to 100, go 0 to 30 and kind of ease into things. And that I think is a lot more practical for most people. Um, I know you have a resource or probably many resources on your website, but I saw what are the first 3 steps of a startup. Is that an ebook that listeners or viewers could download and just kind of learn more about that?
It actually takes you to a request form, and one of our peeps will send it out, and it just is kind of like, hey, where do you start with an acquisition? And same with acquisition, kind of the first steps of that as well. So
Okay, cool. Now with DSOs, you mentioned that, and we've got OSOs for orthodontics and DSOs who are in dental and ortho. Um, that definitely is the buzz. I mean, we're even working with some now, and I didn't really even know anything about them 3, 4 years ago. How do you think that could change the industry?
that's a good question, Luke. I've been in banking for as long as I've been a consultant, so just split it right down the middle, maybe even a little longer in banking. But there was talk about DSOs 12, 15 years ago. It's not like this is a new idea. It's not. They're definitely gaining traction, and specifically in certain markets like Arizona, for example. I mean, my partner Paula, she owns a practice. She's a hygienist. She lives in Arizona. She can do that there. Which is super cool that we have that experience as practice owners in a lot of ways with her. But I don't know, man. I just think that it's going to max out at some point. There's been some predictions that maybe they get up to 25% and kind of max out. I've heard that we're somewhere in the low teens right now, total practices. And again, Arizona's last time I looked at it was like 18%, which is was the highest at the time. That was a few years ago before COVID. So I don't know, man. I still think private practice is still obviously the lion's share. I think we need to protect it, quite frankly, Luke. I think everybody will agree that private practice is better care for our patients. If me and you as professionals in this industry with everybody else in there, if we can help our clients be better business owners, then they can make great money and have a great life, even with the shrinking fees and all that good stuff. Just make them a little bit better business owners, and they'll be fine. I don't spend too many nights stressing about DSOs. I know how hard it was for Paula and is for Paula, my partner, to own a practice as a non-dentist. And she's working with a profitability that's so much smaller as a non-dentist in the practice. I mean, I don't know. I just don't see it, quite frankly. And I'll take it one level further. You sell to a DSO like a Signature or a Heartland, and then those guys could recapitalize and go even bigger to some venture capital, and they're buying it at even higher prices. I mean, the higher you go, the more it doesn't make sense. And so, I mean, you're working with a 10 to 15% profit margin, maybe even 20% if you're really good, that the DSOs are playing with. It's just not a lot of money there, frankly. There's just not. So I'm just not a big DSO crazy person. Sure, there's some successful ones, no doubt, but I still think private practice is here to stay for a long while, for sure, for my career anyways.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how, you said this isn't really a new concept, and I've heard stories of DSOs back in the day, but certainly I think there's more buzz around it now, and probably coming out of a really strong economy with the multiples going up and capital, M&A, realizing how much money is in dentistry and things like that. But I think the same thing. I think it's a phase, and at some point it'll kind of plateau. And a lot of those people who have contracts with DSOs will probably go back into
Yeah.
private practice and start their own thing up again,
I think it's a buzz now because I think people are like, oh, well, I could make some money. I could get a higher multiple because some dummy's going to buy it for more. So why don't I go and do that and then get my money and then I'll jump back in. I mean, that's the way business people think. So if our doctors are thinking that way, they're better at business than we think they are.
For sure. Well, it's been great having you. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I reach out. We're a culture of leading with hand. How do they say that? Leading with a giving hand. Happy to give you any kind of advice. Do a practice analysis on the house. We give our time. That's what we sell, but we'll give it to you first. And if there's some opportunity to help you grow your practice, take it to the next level, show you where you need help, whether or not you hire us full go or not. We just want to help the dental industry. And the cool thing about us is we can do startups, we can do acquisitions. Stefani has a front office program, so if your front office is struggling, we could carve out just a front office program. Paula does a hygiene program, so if you just wanted to focus on hygiene, we can do that. So we've got a lot of diversity in our firm, and we're open to pretty much any conversation. So reach out.
Cool. Yeah. Your website's nxlevelconsultants.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well as the link to your podcast and complimentary practice evaluation. Michael, thanks so much for coming on and taking the time to chat with me.
Luke, thanks so much, man. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about HIP or any of the topics in this episode, send an email to hello@hipcreativeinc.com. That's hello@hipcreativeinc.com, or jump over to our website at hip.agency.